Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a knife review that is way overdue. This is the Null Knives Ghoul. This was sent to me a long time ago. This is actually technically a prototype, but I have enjoyed carrying this. I carried it for a bit right when I got it, and then it sat on a shelf for a bit, and then I came back to it and carried it for a few more days before I actually filmed this. But if you're familiar with Null Knives, then you know he makes some pretty incredible stuff, or designs some pretty incredible stuff, namely like the Voodoo. That's my favorite. There's the Raiden, the Raikou, right? I think there might be one more in there, but this is his most recent one. On the smaller side, but it's got its own personality, and most importantly, it's available. You can buy it right now. These are OEMs by Reate. They are made incredibly well. I'll go over it with you guys. Thanks so much to Null Knives for sending this and being incredibly patient with me. I don't get to keep this. This will go back to him when I am done. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Let's go ahead and measure this guy. So like I said, this one's on the smaller side versus his other knives, but not tiny. 7¼ inches by my measurement. Blade length is coming in about 3 1/8. Cutting edge 3 inches. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and Others. So up against the 8010 and the, where is it? The 8020.5. It's smaller than the 8020.5, but it looks like substantially smaller, but it doesn't feel that smaller. The blade length is actually larger than the 8020.5. I think it's probably the scale contouring and curvature and just the general personality of this knife that makes it feel larger than it is. So don't let the size fool you. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Definitely super similar to the size of the Para 3 with substantially more cutting edge. And then finally, we'll put it up against the Benchmade Group Tillion, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How's the action of this knife? Well, number one, it's a Reate. Number two, it was designed by Null Knives, so the action is really, really good. You don't have a traditional flipper, you don't have thumb studs, you have a fuller that can easily be utilized to reverse flick it really well. You also have a front flipper, which is just about perfect. The size of it, the angle of it, the jimping, right? I'm not really a front flipper guy, so it's got to work really well for me to enjoy it or even want to use it, and this does. My favorite aspect of this knife is that the lock bar is fully nested. The part that sticks out is absolutely ideal. Honestly, this seems like such a silly detail. Lock bar access is something that makes me so frustrated when it's bad, and it's bad most of the time. But when it's good, it's really good, and it's a luxury that people often miss. But having complete and total access to that lock bar means that it's angled correctly, it's textured correctly, you've got room to engage with it from the side and not straight down, because then you're pinching your finger, right? But the access to this is perfect. This is an actual titanium lock bar that's nested into titanium and then has a steel lock bar insert attached to it. Not a requirement, always impressive when companies do this. But this big thick piece that's sticking out, you can see how much that sticks out there. Man, I love that. It looks great. It's perfectly integrated with the frame, right? And while you are trying to use the fuller to reverse flick it or use the front flipper to front flip it, you don't have to worry about where you're putting pressure because the lock bar is not exposed. It's underneath the frame. I love this. That's very, very good and really contributes to the fidget factor and just general ease of manipulation with this knife. I'm a big, big fan of that. With this being on the smaller side and, you know, being a knife that utilizes a front flipper as probably its primary means of deployment, it's really important that you are not forcing people to put their hands or their fingers in little skinny spots back here off of an exposed lock bar, because that just, it makes me not, you know, knives like that, I just don't want to use them. I'm like, I don't want to have to dick with that. Like, I just want to get the blade out, right? So this is a good, the way that this is designed is really good, considering the options utilized for deployment. Carry profile, thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's thicker than you would expect, not massive, but it is thicker slightly than something like the Para 3. These scales are also subtly contoured though, which does make a difference. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This knife is not a problem to carry. It's not a problem for me. It is pretty lightweight and compact. Like I said, slightly thicker than the Para 3 or something like the Para 3, but the scales are contoured, so it's a good trade-off. Materials, you're looking at S90V on this knife. I think it actually says right there. Yeah. S90V, HRC I believe is 60 to 61. Hey, that's perfect. 60 to 61 S90V will blow the doors off of M390 that's properly heat treated, which most of the time it isn't. Most of the time it's 5961. It'll definitely beat that Poo Poo Town HRC range for M390 all day. And you know, a lot of people are confused about MagnaCut. A lot of people say MagnaCut's the newest, the 6364. Will it outperform 6364 MagnaCut? Yeah, because MagnaCut's claim to fame is not edge retention. It's a balance of things. So MagnaCut is not like the new king in terms of edge retention. No, it's just a really, really good balance of composition. If you need a balance of composition, if you need something that is incredibly stainless and tough and has reasonable edge retention, right, then get you some MagnaCut for sure, because it's a great. But if you're looking for, like, you know, something that accentuates pretty good corrosion resistance, not necessarily toughness, and really great edge retention, well, there's a few steels out there, but S90V is definitely more at your speed, right? So just so we know, right, there's a lot of confusion when it comes to steel. I remember it's all confusing, right? Edge retention is not the most important thing all the time for everybody, but sometimes it is, right? S90V is a really, really good balance of, you know, all of these elements, right? Like, I like it for pocket knives, especially when I feel like I need something that's got incredible edge retention, and S90V definitely does. So it's nice to see something as premium as S90V on a knife that is obviously premium. It's got a premium price tag, made by Reate, right? But S90V steel. We have the contour titanium scales. We have a nested titanium liner lock, titanium pocket clip, titanium backspacer, right? A lot of premium stuff. Pretty much what you'd expect. Weight on this guy, and by the way, we do have milling for weight reduction there. So the weight on this knife is coming in at 3.5 ounces. That's great. I don't have a problem with that at all. I doubt most people will. The balance on this knife is a little bit more butt heavy than some people might expect, but not bad. You're still looking at a 3.5 ounce object. It's just not heavy. Let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness before I lose my calipers, and then we'll move into the hardware check. Blade stock thickness on this guy is coming in at, what's that, 125? No, 114 thousandths. So on the thinner side. I'll get out my tools for a hardware check. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. So T8, I'm guessing. Sorry, I got some hangnails there. Sorry about that. We got T8 for the pivot. We got T8 for the body screws. Yes, very good. And only two, they go in, and you don't see them on this side because they thread into the titanium and don't go all the way through. That's nice. Minimizes the total number of steps required to disassemble the knife, and you also don't have to look at any other fasteners besides the pivot from the show side, which is cool. The pocket clip has a hidden screw holding it in place, so the entire process for disassembly is pretty darn simple. I like that. Also T8 across the board, also a good thing. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Okay, meat and potatoes time. It's a Null Knives design, so it's got quite a bit of personality. Depending on your favorite, like my favorite knife from him is the Voodoo, and I feel like that one really has a crap load of personality. So if this was his only design, you know, I would be pointing out like all of these really obvious, amazing design features, like the curvature of the handle and how accommodating it is for how small of a knife it is, right? Placement of the jimping. I love the lines here, how we transition from this smooth contoured zone into this sort of stepped texturing. There's a lot of little areas like that that are very designy, and that's very typical Null. Compared to something like his Voodoo, it's got less personality. It's also on the smaller side, so I want to point out that this is not nearly as to my preferences. That sentence was so dumb. This isn't catering nearly as much to my personal preferences as the Voodoo did. But those are preferences, right? So I want to point that out. But it is cool, and it's very obvious, like, you know, if it didn't have any branding on it, and someone was like, yeah, it's made by Null, I'd be like, of course it is, right? It's cool. I like the flat here on this particular one. We have the satin finish that sort of transitions into the swedge. The swedge has that, like, apocalyptic or acidy look, right? The bevel down to the cutting edge is also that acidy look. The fuller here has that acid look. It's just a really nice way to do this with this clip point blade. The knife is definitely comfortable in terms of like whether or not there are hot spots or zones that don't feel comfortable. No, the knife feels comfortable. For my hands, my pinky is sitting right on top of that peak. So if your hands are smaller than mine, you'll fit in here. If your hands are my size or larger, this isn't super comfortable back here. And so that's a personal preference that, will determine, what I want to carry. And this isn't a knife that, personally, I'm going to keep carrying over and over again because of this. That doesn't mean that it's bad. That just means it doesn't really fit my hand the way that I want it to, right? I think a lot of people will end up in this position here with your pinky kind of sliding off the edge. As far as a 3-finger lock-in, it's plenty good. So if you don't mind a 3-finger lock-in, you're going to be fine. If you're like me and you're like, I need a job for my pinky, I don't like that it doesn't have a job, then, that's going to bother you a little bit. This is not bad. It's just this design. It's going to work for some people and not work for others, right? People, who maybe have smaller hands or don't like large knives or both, it's the same kind of thing. Like, I don't feel comfortable on this knife because I feel like there's all this extra handle that's not being utilized, right? So I just want to be clear. I'm not like criticizing it for being small. It just doesn't fit my hand the way that I want it to. But it is nice. Like, the design is good. It's nice and flowy. It's continuous. The blade looks like it goes with the handle, all of that. We have a few different options. This is the least dressy version. There's also a black and gold one. I think there's a blue one, right? Pivot looks nice. A little bit of a spiral there. You have a little bit of a designy backspacer, a little fuller in there. You got a little lanyard hole right here, a lanyard bar, which is good. I don't like holes on the frame. It says Null knives here, and then in cursive underneath, like when it's in the locked out position, it says S90V. It's nice, classy. As far as cutting geometry goes, pretty normal, right? Not insanely thin, flat ground blade, but it will slice, it will cut, it will definitely poke. S90V, incredible steel. I think the elements of S90V well accentuated on this blade geometry. The most comfortable spot for me is between the index finger and the thumb. I like the jimping here. I wish it went all the way up the ramp, but this is really, really good. I do feel locked in on this knife, even though I don't love a 3-finger lock-in. It does feel plenty good. I don't feel like I'm going to drop this. It is comfortable, and the ergonomic lines are definitely well thought out. Because the handle is on the shorter side, for me, 3-finger lock-in and the bill of the clip being right at the 50% line means that it's right there in the middle of my hand, which I don't love, but I am happy that it's flat and not swooping straight up. That would have sucked. So I can't really complain too much, right? If your hands are smaller than mine, you'll have a little bit of a different experience, but I do appreciate he kept it at 50% and no further, right? There is no mounting position for lefties, and that's a bummer. I don't know how he would have accomplished that no hardware look on the show side and accommodated for lefties, but at the same time, I always like to see when companies, offer mounting positions for left-handed folks. So maybe a left-handed version would have been cool, but I understand that makes it difficult and expensive, right, when you're having these things made. So lefties, no option for you. You'll have to buy this and put it in your right-hand pocket, which many of you are used to doing anyway because the knife world is not very fair to lefties. The pocket clip is definitely its own thing, but it also goes with the knife, right? It's also designy. Null Knives doesn't underdo things, right? Everything is going to have some cool designy element, and I like that. I don't think he's capable of producing a boring knife. There are going to be knives that he makes that people like or don't like, the preferences, but you can't say that his designs are boring. They're definitely not boring. And I appreciate that. Nothing ever feels lazy. Every design feels like there was a lot of effort put into it. So I like that. The stop pin of this knife is located in a pretty traditional spot right there. A little bit of shouldering, a little bit. No blade play up, down, left, or right. No lock stick. No pivot lash. Very smooth in here. Really nice detent on the lighter side, but a nice detent. Works perfectly for the fuller and for the front flipper, right? The Ghoul, what's the price on it? I think the base price of this one you're looking at right here is $325. Not really a big surprise there. Made by Reate. You have contoured titanium. You have S90V. I think a lot of people are like, but you always say, well, Artisan Cutlery makes knives in titanium and S90V. Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons why something like that's going to cost less. Number one, if you don't know, Reate makes a better knife than Artisan Cutlery. Artisan Cutlery is a great company. They make great knives. Reate makes a better knife, period. I mean, you could pick up any Reate knife made in the last, 5 years or 8 years or whatever, however long Artisan Cutlery's been around. Anyone. the Reate's going to feel better. Their manufacturing quality is just better. Again, nothing against Artisan Cutlery, but I'll pay more for a Reate, sure. Number two, these are a lot smaller batch, right? I mean, Artisan Cutlery can take something and just like make a bajillion of them. So not only does it cost less for them to make a less complex and just less, I mean, truthfully, just a less premium, right? If we're there's a bunch of companies that I could use. I'm just using Artisan Cutlery unfairly as the example here. So cost less in terms of like they can pump out a bajillion of any model, right? And it's less complicated, and the quality manufacturing is generally speaking lower on average. Not bad, just lower than Reate, right? Yeah, and with Null being the designer and then having to like pay in to have Reate make these, and then he's still trying to make money off of them, like the margin is just, it's not the same, right? So it can't really, even though it is a titanium and S90V knife made in China, you would be in, you'd have to go so far out of your way to ignore all of the other elements that go into the price, right? I think anybody who says that has to intentionally ignore a bunch of other things. So is the price tag fair at $325? Yeah, I think so. If you don't like smaller knives, if you don't like a three-finger lock-in, then this might not be for you. This is less in terms of personality versus his other stuff. Again, I mean, it might be kind of unfair because the Voodoo is like wild. Like that was a real crazy one, right? But if you're like me and you want, more of that Null personality, I think the Voodoo, just wait until he does another one of those. I think this would be cool in a larger size. I'm not saying it's bad because it's not large, right? I'm also not saying it's bad at all. I think people who like this or want something from Null that's on the smaller side, but you still have that Null feel, right? Yeah, this is great. I don't like it as much as his other models. I like the Raiden, the Raikou, and especially the Voodoo more. But there's also more hand room there, right? Those are just better suited for me. I think the price is fine. It's actually pretty impressive for Reate. Anytime Reate is under $350, it's impressive. Reate tends to be closer to $400 with a lot of their stuff. So yeah, not bad at all. I really can't complain too much. I don't want people unfairly comparing to companies like Artisan Cutlery, pumping out a flat titanium frame with an S90V blade that's got like a satin finish on it, like a machine satin finish, and it's like $200. It is not the same thing at all. But if that's all you're looking for is just the materials that are in the shape of a knife, then yeah, you save yourself some money. You want something a little more personality, a little more designy, right? A little more effort, better execution, right? Better machining quality, stuff like that. Then yeah, pay some extra money because this will be worth it. So to those people, I'd recommend this, but this obviously isn't going to be for everybody. I'll link this down in the description. You guys can check it out if you want to. This will go back, like I said, to Null knives after this video. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.